So this video, or these three videos, are certainly ones for you non-league geography nerds out there. We're going to be looking at the largest non-league stadium from every single of the 48 ceremonial counties in England. Now, because there's 48 counties, that means that there's a lot to fit into one video, so we're going to split it down into three, 16 in each part. We're going to be looking at the largest stadium by capacity that currently plays in non-league football. But first of all, this video is sponsored by OneFootball, which is a great way to stay up to date with loads of different news, scores, transfers, fixtures, league tables, stats, all sorts of different information from lots of different teams across lots of different leagues across the footballing world. Also included in the app is information about where fixtures are going to take place. It's got an average rating of 4.7 and 4.8 out of 5 on Apple and Android, with over 1 million people voting for their rating on Android in particular. So it is a very highly rated app. And yeah, if you want to download it, the link to download it will be in the top line of the description. But let's start this mammoth task of looking at the 48 biggest stadiums. We're going to be doing this in alphabetical order. So this video is going to include all the stadiums from counties beginning with letters A to F. And now it's actually none beginning with letter A, so we go straight on to B. First one is Bedfordshire. It's the home of AFC Dunstable and Dunstable Town Creasy Park, which is in Dunstable. It's got a capacity of 3,065 with 350 seats. Those two sides ground share and play in the 8th and 9th tier respectively. It's a relatively small stadium, but Bedfordshire doesn't have a huge number of football teams in it. The most notable one is Luton Town, but with them being up in the Championship now, there's not really any other teams in the county that get close to them in terms of stature. Up next is Berkshire, and the biggest stadium in this county is Maidenhead United's home, York Road. It's got a capacity of 4,000 with 553 seats. It's one of the oldest stadiums in the entirety of non-league, opening in 1873. The club now play in the National League, and you can tell that it is definitely an old-fashioned stadium. It's got a lot of beauty to it, and it is, in my opinion, a really nice stadium. It's most notable for having Maidenhead United FC spelt along the wall on the back of the Bell Street end with black and white alternating panels. Next up we go to one of the smallest counties in terms of area in England, and that is Bristol. It's a county that a lot of people don't really realise exists, that Bristol itself is a county that pretty much just contains the city of Bristol. In amongst there are two Football League sides in Bristol City and Bristol Rovers, but you had to drop right down to the lower levels of non-league to find the biggest non-league stadium, and that belongs to Mangotsfield United. Their home, the GJC Commercial Stadium, has a capacity of 3,068 with 300 seats. They play in the 8th tier currently. It's quite basic. It's standard for the lower levels of non-league football. Next up we move over to Buckinghamshire and to 7th tier side Chesham United's home, the Meadow. It's got a capacity of 3,000 with 284 seats. The ground itself could be described as somewhat of a little bit of a bowl, with gradiented stands around the pitch. Now to the first ground, beginning with C, and we go to Cambridgeshire, more specifically to Histon, to their ground, Bridge Road. It's got a capacity of 4,300 with 1,700 seats, so it's got a lot of seats in the ground. It's a ground that used to be at National League level. The county obviously plays home to Cambridge United as well, and Cambridge itself is only a couple of miles away from Histon. Cambridge City, they actually share with Histon and have done since 2018. The ground's been open since 1962, and pretty much all of the seats are contained within two stands along the side of the pitch that sit right next to each other. It's quite an old-fashioned ground again. Now on to Cheshire, and we go to Widnes FC. You might have expected somebody like Chester FC's Diva Stadium to be the top one in this county, but Widnes is just inside Cheshire, just outside of Merseyside, and it hosts Widnes FC. Now, it's typically a rugby league ground home to Widnes Vikings, but it has got a 4G pitch that is also used by Widnes FC, who now play in the 8th tier. They get crowds of far under 500. For a stadium that is so big, it is kind of strange since it's just more crowd in there, but regardless, it is the biggest ground used in non-league football from Cheshire. Now we go on to the smallest county in England, which is the City of London. It is right in the centre of London, It's by far the smallest, only 2.9 square kilometres, and there are a grand total of 0 football pitches, let alone football clubs or non-league clubs in the City of London. Now looking down to the most southwestern county in England, that is Cornwall. The biggest ground in there is Truro City. Now in terms of football infrastructure in Cornwall overall, there is very, very little. It's at the point where the biggest stadium for football is actually Truro Road, the home of Truro City, and this was due to be knocked down any minute pretty much. It's got a capacity of 3,200 with 1,675 seats. Now most of these seats are temporary, and Truro have had to go and ground share with Torquay last season because they thought that the ground was going to be knocked down. They were kicked out of the ground because it had been sold for years, and they're looking to build a new stadium called the Stadium for Cornwall, which is going to be used alongside Cornish Pirates, a rugby side from Penzance. But that's been delayed, that still isn't happening, so there's still Truro Road, and it's still the biggest football ground in Cornwall. From the most southwestern now to the most northwestern county in England, we go to Cumbria and to Barrow AFC. Their home, the Progression Solicitors Stadium, has a capacity of 4,200 with just 1,000 seats. They've been in the ground since 1909. The ground only really has one relatively small seated stand, but there's a lot of terracing around, but a lot of that is uncovered. Now to Derbyshire, and again to one of the bigger stadiums on this list, one of a few that are over 10,000 capacity in non-league football is Chesterfield, and their stadium, the Proact Stadium, which holds 10,300 people all seated. They're now heading into their second season in the National League, and the ground has 4 really nicely sized all-seated stands. It's quite a modern ground and was only opened in 2010. Next we're going back down south and to a ground that I briefly mentioned a few minutes ago. That is Torquay United's home, Plainmoor. The ground holds 6,500 with 3,032 seats. There's 2 stands that have terracing and 2 stands with seats, and unusually the 2 with seats are along the length of the pitch as you may expect, and also behind one of the goals. Unusually the hospitality facilities and media facilities are actually in that stand behind the goal, and that's not something that you see many places in non-league. We drop down 1 tier out the National League down to the National League South for the biggest stadium in Dorset. That is the Bob Lucas Stadium, the home of Weymouth. The ground is a former Greyhound and Speedway stadium and holds 6,600 with 900 seats. You can get some good height to watch matches at this ground. The seated stand has quite a bit of elevation. You have to go up some steps to even get to the first row of seats, and the rest of the ground is just terracing, but it is quite gradiented, so it is quite a nice old-fashioned ground. We're going right back up north again to Durham, and the biggest ground in that county is Hartlepool United's home, Victoria Park. The ground opened in 1908, has 3 seated stands and 1 terrace behind the 1 goal. It's got a capacity of 7,865 with 4,166 seats. So it's quite a big ground, especially at National League level. Now to the counties beginning with E, and the first one is one that does not have many football clubs in it at all, apart from one obvious one. It is the East Riding of Yorkshire, and the only real main club in that county is Hull City. Apart from that, it's quite a sparsely populated county as it is, despite being relatively big, and there's just not a huge amount of football teams in there. The pick of those smaller teams, the one that had the biggest stadium, is Bridlington. The side who play in the Northern Counties East League Premier Division, which is the 9th tier, play at Queensgate, which has got a reported capacity of 3,000 with 500 seats. Now we're on to East Sussex, and we look at Eastbourne Borough's home, Priory Lane. It is one of the few on this list that is a 3G stadium, and overall it has a capacity of 4,151 with 667 seats. While the capacity isn't that high, there is actually covered terracing pretty much around the entirety of the pitch, which is good to see. Now down to Essex, and reportedly the biggest capacity in that county in non-league is Canby Islands ground, Park Lane. It's got a capacity of 4,100 with around 500 seats, and though you might think that Billericay Town's ground is actually a lot bigger because it has got a lot more seats. It's got 1,376 seats, but their overall capacity is reportedly only only currently 3,500, which puts it less than Canvey Island. The ground also holds an interesting record. It is the lowest altitude ground in England. It is just a few meters below sea level and sits actually right pretty much on the sea front, but there are some barriers to stop the seawater from getting into the ground, thankfully. Anyway, that is it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 and part 3 when they are uploaded. They will be in the description down below. If you enjoyed the video, remember to hit the like button and click subscribe as well to stay up to date with all the latest content, all relating to non-league football, all sorts of different stuff to do with stadiums, news, updates on different unique situations, all different types of things. So make sure that you click that subscribe button to stay up to date so you don't miss anything. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.